In the gentle hills of Yorkshire, England, nestled between green pastures and winding dirt paths, lay the quiet village of Brook Hollow. It was a place where church bells echoed like whispers, where cottages wore ivy like old coats, and where time seemed to pass just a little slower. The village had only one bakery, one school, one church, and one community hall. People greeted each other by name. Lanterns flickered in windows every evening. Wildflowers painted the roadsides, and sheep grazed lazily on distant hills. Life was simple, humble, and warm. Among its heartbeats lived a kind woman named Eleanor. She had soft silver hair like moonlight and eyes that still held laughter, though age had deepened the wrinkles around them. People loved her not just because she was gentle, but because she had mastered the rare art of listening. Her cottage, Willowbrook House, sat at the edge of the stream, with its hibiscus-colored front door and garden full of lavender, marigold, and roses. Inside that cottage lived someone equally special. Her husband, William Brooks. William was 55 years old, though his spirit felt younger. He had sandy hair, gentle spectacles, and a warm voice that made even the most complicated grammar sound like poetry. He had been an English teacher for most of his life, but William was more than a teacher. He was a believer. He believed in words as bridges, as medicine, as light. He believed that language wasn't just for speaking, but for connecting hearts. Each morning, villagers would see him walking to the community center carrying a stack of worn books, his scarf trailing in the breeze, his face lit with purpose. Every afternoon, after classes, he would return to his cottage, where Eleanor would greet him with a cup of tea and the comforting smell of homemade bread. They didn't have children, but they had purpose. One chilly Monday morning, something quietly shifted. William entered his classroom with his usual kind smile. The beginner's English class had around 20 adults, newcomers to England, mostly from Poland, Spain, India, Sudan, and Turkey. They came from different lands, but stood on common ground. Their voices carried hesitation, but their eyes carried hope. As William set down his books, his gaze paused. There, in the very back of the room, sat a young woman alone, silent, uncertain, yet searching. She had olive-brown skin, long dark hair loosely tied behind her back, and wide eyes that held a tired kind of courage. Her clothes were simple, but she carried herself with gentle dignity. She held no notebook, only a pen and a folded leaflet. William smiled and greeted the room. "Good morning, everyone." In varying accents, voices echoed back, "Good morning, teacher." The woman in the back row did not speak, but she watched closely. Her name was Anna. She had arrived in England just weeks ago, from a small village near Bucharest, Romania. Her husband had accepted work in construction in a neighboring town and had rented a tiny apartment near Brook Hollow. Everything around her felt unfamiliar: the food, the weather, the buildings, the sounds. She could not speak English. She could not understand conversations. Even visits to the grocery store felt frightening. When she saw a leaflet for free English classes, she clung to it like a lifeline. That is how she arrived in William's classroom. That first day, she didn't speak. She just watched, quietly absorbing every sound, every gesture, every word. The next day, William noticed her again. She sat on the same spot, same posture, pen between her fingers, eyes soft but determined. At the end of class, he approached her. "Hello," he said gently. "You are Anna?" "Yes." She nodded shyly. "Yes, Anna." He smiled. "That's a beautiful name. Did you understand today's lesson?" She hesitated, searching for words. Her voice was unsure but earnest. "Little, not much, but I try." William nodded. "Trying is more important than understanding. You are welcome here, always." Something in her eyes softened. She didn't smile, but relief flickered across her face. From that day, Anna never missed a single class. She struggled. She pronounced words wrongly. She mixed tense forms. She confused want with went, were with were, live with leave. But she tried. If she didn't understand, she would sit quietly listening, repeating, thinking. One morning, William asked the students to introduce themselves with one simple sentence. My name is Carlos. I am from Spain. My name is Amina. I come from Sudan. My name is Elsie. I come from Poland. Then it was Anna's turn. She stood. Her fingers trembled slightly. My name Anna. I am come from Romania. The sentence was wrong. But the room applauded. It was not applause for perfection. It was applause for courage. William only smiled. Very well, Anna, he said warmly. Let's fix it together. He gently corrected her. My name is Anna. I am from Romania. She repeated with more confidence. My name is Anna. I am from Romania. That was the first time she smiled in class. Brook Hollow was a village that welcomed quietly. The baker, Mr. Haddock, left a warm loaf for her at the doorstep one day with a note that read, Practice English. You say bread, please, and I will understand. The florist shyly gave her a rose and said, Flower. Red flower. The postman once paused and said, Hello, Anna, slowly, patiently, like a friend. Bit by bit, she began to understand. She began to hear music in English, not just noise. She began to feel less invisible. One morning at the market, an elderly woman greeted her cheerfully. Beautiful weather, isn't it? Anna searched for words. Yes, sun happy today. The woman laughed gently, not cruelly, just kindly. Yes, dear, the sun is happy today. They both smiled. Anna walked home carrying apples, a loaf of bread, and something even better, the feeling of belonging. One evening, after class when most students had left, William approached Anna. You work very hard, he said. I see that. You remind me of someone I used to teach long ago. Anna looked confused but curious. You are learning, he continued, but learning faster requires help outside of class. Would you like extra lessons? We can meet twice a week here at the community hall. Slowly, patiently. That was how it began. Every Wednesday and Friday evening, after the sun dipped behind the hills and lanterns began to glow, Anna stayed behind. The hall would grow quiet. The smell of chalk, dust and tea would linger. Outside, crickets began their nightly songs, and inside, two silhouettes sat at the old wooden table near the window, speaking slowly, learning together. Thank you. How are you? I feel happy. I feel shy. I want to learn more. Every lesson was a step. Every sentence was a doorway. Every shared smile was a tiny beginning. One evening, William surprised her. He placed a thin book on the table, a children's storybook, The Little Prince. She read slowly. He nodded. Simple words, deep meaning. She opened it carefully. Like it was made of glass. Read the first sentence, he said. She tried. The words were clumsy, but he helped her. Once when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture. She paused. I know this book. She whispered. In my language, we say, Mikil Primp. William smiled. Yes, in my language, we say, The Little Prince. Same story, she murmured, but different words. He looked at her meaningfully. Words may change, he said, but hearts understand. That moment stayed with Anna. It stayed with William too. They didn't rush it. They didn't name it. But something had begun. Weeks turned into months. Students came and went. Leaves turned golden. Then fell. Then grew again. Seasons changed. People in Brook Hollow began to notice. Anna was no longer the shy, quiet woman from Romania. She now helped new students feel welcome. She translated basic phrases. She bought flowers from the florist by speaking full sentences. She even joked with the baker. One afternoon, children accidentally kicked a football toward her in the village square. The little boy shouted, "Throw!" It missed. She picked it up, smiled, and said, "Kick, I kick." It was clumsy, but perfect. She kicked it gently, laughing. Someone saw her laugh that day. They had never seen her laugh before, and that person was William. He realized something then. She was no longer just a student. She was becoming Anna. Full of light. One day, William brought Anna to his cottage. They had reached the lesson on English, idioms, and he wanted to show her books, tea, and his world. When Eleanor opened the door, she smiled like she already knew her. Anna felt nervous, but Eleanor's voice was warm. "Come in, dear. Anyone who loves learning is welcome in my house." They drank tea in the garden surrounded by hummingbirds and rosemary bushes. Eleanor, wise and observant, simply watched them. "You to look peaceful," she said softly to William later. He smiled and said nothing, but his silence was not empty. It was full. It happened on a spring afternoon. The village square was bathed in warm golden light. Cherry blossoms danced in the breeze. Children chased each other between stalls of cheese, honey, and handmade pottery there. In the shade of the ancient oak tree, the tree where villagers often sat for quiet thoughts, William gently held Anna's hand. Not his student's hand, not his friend's hand, but the hand of someone he cherished. His eyes held that same warmth. He used to teach with, but deeper. She looked at him knowing, because the heart understands without translation. "Anna," he said softly, "will you share this life with me? Will you be not just my student, but my partner, my friend, my love?" She didn't speak at first. She didn't cry. She just looked at him. Then she whispered, "Yes, I choose this life with you." That evening, he didn't teach her English. He just held her hand, and together they watched the sun. Their wedding wasn't fancy. It didn't have glittering lights or expensive dresses. It was held in the village garden, under the open sky. There was music played by the local school children. Tables set with fresh bread, honey, and lavender lemonade. People spoke in many accents, some English, some broken English, some Romanian. But everyone understood, not through language, through joy. When the pastor asked Anna if she took William to be her husband, she didn't recite a long vow. She simply said, in perfect English, "Yes, with all my heart." And for William, that was the most beautiful sentence ever spoken. Anna didn't stop learning English after marriage. She kept studying, day by day. Now sitting beside William, not behind him. Soon, she began helping with lessons. She explained grammar simply, kindly, gently. Students felt safe with her. They didn't fear making mistakes. One day, a nervous student mispronounced thought as thought. The class giggled. The boy looked embarrassed, but Anna said gently, "I used to say think instead of think. We all learn. Every mistake is a stepping stone." William looked at her with admiration. He was no longer just a teacher. They were now a team. They built something beautiful. A community language center, not just for English, but for belonging. They taught words. But more than words, they taught courage. Over the years, they traveled together. They visited Anna's childhood home in Romania, ate fresh honey, danced to violin music, and sat on wooden porches under the stars. They traveled to Italy, where William learned the phrase "ti amo," and Anna laughed because he kept saying "ti mouse" by mistake. They visited France, where they listened to poetry near the Seine. But no matter where they went, every journey ended the same way. Back in Brook Hollow. To the little cottage with a hibiscus-colored door. To lavender and marigold. To their classroom. To their family of learners. Years passed. Hair grew gray. Laugh lines deepened. But their love stayed like spring. One quiet evening, after a long day of teaching, Anna and William sat in their garden. As twilight painted the sky with silver and rose, Anna opened the old copy of The Little Prince. She smiled and whispered, "Once I read this book and understood nothing. And now," William asked. "I understand everything," she replied. "Not because of language, because of love." He took her hand. She looked at him and said, softly, "Love is the real language, is it not?" He nodded. "That," he whispered, "is the final lesson." Years later, people would still speak of them. Children who grew up in that little village would tell their children, "There once lived a teacher named William, who believed in words, but it was his wife, Anna, who taught everyone that some words are not spoken, they are felt, and that sometimes the most beautiful language is the language of the heart." The village of Brook Hollow had grown. What was once a quiet valley of cobblestone and flowered fences had slowly welcomed people from many parts of the world. The bakery now sold Polish sweet bread, Indian samosas, and Romanian kozonek during holidays. Children in the schoolyard now spoke English mixed with laughter in Spanish, Urdu, and Swahili. There was something beautiful about it. And at the heart of this beautiful change stood a small building, with a white door and a wooden sign that read, "The Language of Hearts Learning House English, Confidence, Courage and Community." It wasn't just a school. It was a place you entered as a stranger and left as part of something. Anna was now fluent. Her English still held a soft Romanian melody, but it was warm, expressive, and full of quiet wisdom. She had begun teaching beginners, especially women who had arrived in England feeling lost. Like she once did, she didn't just teach English. She taught how to walk confidently into the grocery store, how to say "I need help" without fear, how to read letters from the doctor, how to answer the phone with confidence, how to feel less alone, and most importantly, how to believe in themselves. One chilly November morning, a new student walked into Anna's classroom. Her name was Lila. She wore a long coat, a headscarf, and carried silence like a shadow. She didn't speak not because she couldn't, but because something inside her had forgotten how. Anna watched her. During the first class, Lila didn't try, she just listened. Her eyes absorbed everything, like windows catching light. After everyone left, Anna softly said, "You don't have to speak. Speaking comes later. First, you need to feel safe." Lila looked at her, and something in her eyes slowly melted. She nodded, just once. For weeks, she didn't speak. She copied words. She listened. She sat near Anna like a quiet moon. Until one afternoon, during a conversation exercise, a student asked shyly, "Teacher, how do you say 'my home misses me'?" Before Anna could answer, Lila whispered softly, almost to herself, "My home misses me too." Silence fell, not the cold silence of fear, but the warm silence of healing. Anna didn't correct her grammar. She just smiled, placed a hand on Lila's, and said, "That was perfect." From that day, Lila began to speak, not quickly, not perfectly, but bravely. Some languages are learned with books, some are learned with patience, and some with love. William, now older but still passionate, began writing a book. It wasn't a grammar book, nor a dictionary, nor a collection of rules. It was something new. He titled it Language, Love, and the Human Heart, How Words Connect. Livesh wrote about Anna, about Lila, about Carlos, who learned English to tell a joke, about Zainab, who learned English to tell her daughter she was proud of her, about Alex, who learned English to write apologies to the man he once hurt. William believed that language was not made in classrooms. It was made in laughter, tears, struggle, hope, and human connection. When he finished the last page, he dedicated the book to only one person, to Anna, who taught me the most important words of all. She found the dedication one afternoon while watering her garden. She pressed her hand softly against it and whispered, "You were always my teacher too." *1 Winter morning, it snowed softly in Brook Hollow. White roofs, quiet streets, firewood crackling in chimneys. Anne arrived at the classroom early, as always, with fresh tea and warm notebooks. But that morning, she found an empty chair at the front of the classroom. Not one of the students' chairs. His, William's chair. There was a book, his glasses, a piece of chalk. But no William. He wasn't gone. He had simply retired. After 52 years of teaching, he finally decided it was time to rest his voice. But the classroom did not feel empty, because William did not take the classroom with him. He left it in her hands. As Anna stood there, sunlight shining on frost outside the window, she realized something powerful. She was not standing where she once sat. She was standing where he once stood. The student had become the teacher, and their shared dream had become hers. Years passed. The Language of Heart's learning house became more than a school. It became a tradition. Some students became teachers. Some opened their own classrooms. Some translated books. Some became nurses, librarians, musicians, cooks, and town council members. But all of them, every single one, carried the same belief. Language is not just words. Language is connection. It is the bridge between fear and courage, the doorway from loneliness to belonging, the soft hand that reaches out in kindness, the voice that says, "You are not alone here." In the garden behind the little schoolhouse, there stood a wooden bench under the ancient oak tree. The same tree where Anna once said yes. People still came and sat there. They talked. Read. Cried. Laughed. Sometimes they said nothing at all, because silence too can be a language. On the bench was a small plaque with four simple words. No grammar, no rules, no lessons. Just truth. Love is a language.